Hi, I'm Natalie Akell, and this is a poem titled My Body a Well. My body a well. It was like trying to squeeze water from a stone. You know all that its preciousness is needed for. The morning coffee, Crayola-soaked paintbrushes so little hands continue their masterpieces, turning your kitchen into the Louvre. Of course, the evening bath and for diluting salty tears from tantrums that just had to happen tonight. Yet, you find a way to make something from nothing. It was feelings of guilt, shame, isolation, when crying for help and being told, shh, we're all going through it. It was intimacy in the quiet, city buildings drifting still in the breeze, the sound of windows closing like sparrows through the leaves, bringing worms, those early birds, quiet their young's hungry song. They searched through the pebbles all morning, but that's not something for the babies to know. Motherhood in the pandemic, squeezing water from a stone, all the doorways open to you, so there's no difference between your body and their home. It was first-time parents birthing alone in hospital rooms, masked up and scared, and mamas expected to sell snow to winter when your 3-year-old's melting down and you were the only one who found a way to make them laugh, and maybe those screams interrupted your third Zoom of the day, but duty calls, and we know who society expects to pick up the phone. It was loneliness, like, it can't be just me who feels like this, and those missed moments of reassuring smiles from other caretakers passing you on the street with loving nods that says, I've been there, you've got this, it will be okay. So through the rain, strangers with strollers figured out how to pray with their eyes. It was a time of no hellos, so no goodbyes, but you felt their sigh of relief in the wind, that someone like them was pushed their way, even if the tides say you will be back together, but not just yet. It was telling your kids it will be okay when you had no idea yourself, looking in the mirror, thinking 1, 2, 3, yet you still forgot to breathe. It was George Floyd calling for his mother that damn day in May, and Black mothers holding their children close, thinking this is the world we're expected to go back into. It's the youngest knocking on the bathroom door, asking, "What's for dinner?" He almost walked in on you, but you remember to lock it, so you have that moment of peace before opening the door and saying, let me see what we have, a master of your craft. It's the mom for whom I nanny apologizing to me whenever she turns on the TV, and me beside her saying, let Bluey and Bingo run wild, go rest. She never does. It was FaceTimes, maybe red wines, and lullabies whispered like a plea. It was blood-rushed cheeks flushed when feeling unconsidered, when being unconsidered, yet still getting up the next day and planning. Motherhood in the pandemic, accepting there is no water here, but what crafts can we make with this rock? And how long until we get to the river? Walk with me, I say, as you jump into the destination you feel lives within us all. And so we go, together, celebrating the things we're taught not to. The times you said, fuck it, ice cream for dinner, or you broke sleep training and held that baby close. Celebrate the times you let them cry it out, you pacing back and forth when they scream and you suffer, but then suddenly they fall asleep and you pray to whichever God that might take the time to hear you, that your breath does not wake them. You creep away from their door, making deals with the cracks in the floorboards. Celebrate the time you got a moment to yourself. For the moms who danced when dropping their kids back off at daycare after months of hair pull-outable mornings, and celebrate the mothering that occurred in spaces hard for us to see, the schools, shelters, drag houses, and probably even the streets, and for every mom kept away from their child during this feral and unknown time. I read somewhere the other day that to mother is a verb. I believe in that motion, the motion of mothering. We find love that leaves us blooming in the sun, resilient towards this changing earth. So maybe take the smooth stone in your pleated palm and skip it along the pond. The water came from you, and it came from you all along. I hope you collected enough drops for yourself to have a stream at your side wherever you walk, so you can listen to the drip, drip, drop. Sit on the rocks and know how precious you are. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the PowerPoint with the pictures. I recognized a couple of my own kids there and the wine glass too. So I'm Anna Kropitsky, and I was asked to moderate this program on motherhood during the pandemic, or amid the pandemic. One thing I do want to note as we talk to our three panelists, and I'm just going by what I see on the tile. So Jenny Bobea, Associate Dean of English and ESL, Carrie Shao, Instructor in Accounting, and Marissa Lontock, College Lecturer in our Culinary. So these are our three panelists, and we'll discuss some questions today that I hope you find helpful, impactful. And so one note is that there are so many different perspectives that we could take from the pandemic: parenthood, fatherhood, taking care of elderly parents, family relationships, friendships. And so I just want to recognize that all of those are perspectives and voices that are so important to each one of us. But just for today, just for this program, we will focus on motherhood, something that I find to be the hardest job I've ever had and will likely ever have in my life. I became a mother about 8 years ago, and then again about 4 years ago. I have two kids. My daughter is just about to turn 8 in September. She's already working on her birthday wish list. And my son just turned 4. So those are tough ages, but at the same time, from my own experience during the pandemic, I found so many surprises that were great, some things that I've discovered about myself, about my children, and then other things that were really tough. And that's what, and so we hope to cover all of those areas today. So let me begin with a first question to open up the conversation to our panelists. And that is, what did motherhood amid the pandemic look like to you? And feel free to share as much as you want about your stage of motherhood. So let's start with, let's start with Carrie. Carrie, do you want to respond first?
All right, thank you, Anna. Wow, my first answer will be the support. I'm the mother. I got to make sure there's enough supplies in the refrigerator. So definitely this is something very real to us. I'm the person who needed to put everything in the refrigerator. I will make sure there's toilet paper is we have a toilet paper for everyone during the pandemic. I'm the person that's in charge of that. So also the water, make sure we have a water inside the kitchen. So all of that, that's little tiny little something detail. However, I noticed when we talk about a mom, always, there's a care, there's a love, like reflected in everybody's mind, right? During the pandemic, I realized not only I wanted to take care of my children, my family, also I like to extend that love, that care to my community as well. For example, during the pandemic, as a mom, I made a monetary donation to our community charity. Also, I made a monetary donation to our college HCCC Foundation. I guess this is just like a little token from my heart. Just I want everybody to stay safe, be well, just like my family. I feel like we have been incredibly blessed during this pandemic. No one hit by that terrible virus. So we're going to continue stay safe as a community, as a family. All right, thank you. That's my story. Very brave during the
Thank you,
pandemic.
Carrie. So Jenny, what did your motherhood amid the pandemic look like?
Hi, Anna. Thank you. So I'm a mom of now 3 and 5-year-olds. When the pandemic started, they were 2 and 4. I'm married, so at the time my husband was in between jobs, and he did start working. So some of the time it was me and my husband, and a lot of the time it was just my kids, myself, and my new job. I would describe it as a lot of mac and cheese, Netflix, and more wine than I would care to admit. It was very tough in the beginning. I think for me, I found myself thrust into a role that, interestingly enough, I mean, I know, you know, I've been a mom for 5 years. I've always known, well, I am a mom. I've got 2 kids. Clearly, you know, this is my role. But I didn't feel thrust into it until the pandemic. I suddenly found myself in a role that felt so bizarre to me. It felt being, you know, a stay-at-home mom essentially is what I was, but also being a working mom at the same time was just foreign to me. And I realized there was so much that I had to learn about myself, and not just about myself, but about mothering my children. And that was a learning curve, you know. And it's funny that this learning curve came after, you know, 5 years of thinking, you know, I've got this, you know, I've got this down pat. I had just gotten down pat the working mom role, the mom guilt that is constantly, at least in my mind, and then all of a sudden I'm doing something completely different, and I found myself with a full-time job and a second full-time job, and also a doctoral program to get through. And for me, that struggle didn't really change until I kind of changed the perspective, or the expectations that I had for myself, which were incredibly high, and I didn't want to lower. I wanted to be the best stay-at-home mom that I could be, and I also wanted to be the best date I could be, and also the best wife I could be. And that kind of led to a realization one day that, you know what, after a lot of crying, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of children climbing on my back, and, you know, while I'm on a Zoom call, that I could not do everything, you know, in the way that I wanted it to be. And when I lowered those expectations for myself and took things one day at a time, I think there was a huge shift in what I was able to accomplish in my own sort of parenting skills, in becoming the parent that I wanted to be with my children. And also, I think it really changed the dynamic between my husband and myself. You know, I think there were a lot of things that just never and I think we'll talk about this later when we talk about gender roles, but I think the fact that childcare was taken away from us in the form of school and childcare for younger kids really directly impacted mothers, and it's almost as though that burden was defaulted to mothers. And I think that brought about a lot of conversations with my husband that we hadn't really had a chance to discuss before. So for me, it really looked like a change of perspective, a change of the way I was parenting. It was a completely new world for me, and I learned a lot more about myself and about my kids than I knew before.
Thank you, Jenny. So before we jump to some gender role conversation that Jenny mentioned, Marissa and perhaps her special guest star, do you want to talk? Are you able to talk?
Yeah, so this was pandemic to me right there. So I have two sons. One just turned 9, and the other one was 1 year old. Is 1 year old. So I was breastfeeding during that whole pandemic year and during all the WebEx meetings. How was it? I sort of enjoyed and appreciated the whole period that we were on lockdown. It gave me more time to think. It gave me a lot of time to appreciate the kids. I don't know. I'm probably weird, but I did not find it like a real struggle in a way, because I was in that, I guess, in that stage where I appreciate things because I know there's a meaning to these things. And so that's how I viewed the whole pandemic as a mother. So that's it.
Thank you, Marissa, for sharing. Thank you. All right, so let's jump to the next question that Jenny alluded to, and that is, how did societal gender roles affect your experience as a parent during this pandemic? So Jenny, you kind of sort of started talking about it. So why don't you continue?
Yeah, and I would like to hear about this from others, during the Q&A, but for me, I thought it was interesting that, so children are home and, that's it. And I have a spouse, but the default sort of childcare still kind of fell on the mom. I realized, or I noticed a lot of the things that got done were done by me, and then at the same time, I also had, a full-time job, to contend with and also take care of the children. And I feel that, the whole pandemic took a really large toll on mothers. I think it was something like 3.1 trillion work mothers ended up leaving the workforce and ending up having to leave the workforce, and still 1.3 are still unemployed because of the demands that were suddenly placed on them in the pandemic. And I thought it was interesting that this was just kind of the societal default. This is, well, the mothers need to take care of their children. And for me, what that looked like was, really getting my kids ready every morning for, their school day, which was now at home and next to my computer, or not school day, because they're in preschool, and I'm lucky to have found a school that took both of them. So the youngest one was in pre-nursery and my oldest was in pre-K 3. And they were there from 9 to 5. It was not a part-time. It was, they're there the entire day for my, whole work day. So it was really interesting then having them, next to me while I'm on Zoom meetings back to back all day. And I felt that, I didn't have a choice. I didn't really have much of a choice. I don't think many mothers did, especially the ones who, had to leave the workforce. I feel very privileged, very lucky to have been able to keep a job during that time. But it was definitely not lost on me that it was sort of my responsibility or my arena to contend with. And especially for me, I think it's different because I have very young children. So I have a 2-year-old who only wanted to be with mommy. That was it. There's nobody else. Even if my husband, tried to help or, and did help and did a lot of things in support of the situation. But at the end of the day, some things for my children, only mom could do. And that really compounded things for me. It really, I think it made me even more moody in a way, where I felt this real deep sense of unfairness. I think there's a lot of gratitude, there's for being able to spend that time with their children. I love my children. They are really precious, but I really felt that there was this sort of unfair expectation of mother and an ambiguity in all of my identities. This was something very clear to me, where I felt like I didn't feel like a full-time mom, a good full-time mom, and I didn't feel like I was fully performing at work either. And it was like, well, who am I now? I don't know which one of these identities. Am I all of these? But I can't do any of these well. And it really put a lot of things into question for me. Also, I feel that fathers are expected to work. It's kind of like a societal expectations that fathers work. But then for a mom, it's almost like a choice. It's like, well, you have a choice to work in situations where you have, 2 working spouses, for example. And for me, I was like, but that isn't a choice. That's not a choice. Even though I have a spouse who is at home, I felt like this was strictly, working is a part of my identity and my career is a part of my identity. And all of a sudden, all of this was thrown into question. And I spent a year kind of wondering who I was, where could I be all of these things? Where are they mutually exclusive? Can I really do it all? And it took a really long time of redefining what those expectations were for me to kind of get through the year. I'll stop there.
Thank you for sharing, Jenny. I'll just note, the other day I saw something how we need to stop saying, taking an opportunity to not necessarily to complain, but express challenges without having to follow up. But I love my children, right? Like it's okay to just be not okay with something without having to state, but I love my children. I think you mentioned that during your comment, and I thought that was interesting. Something I'm trying to do less of. Carrie,
Yes.
what about
Yes.
your perspective about the gender roles and how that came out during the pandemic?
All right. Yeah, I agree with you, Anna. We all love our children. And also, I think Jenny just brought up a really good point that as a mom, I feel like we have different roles. We have a different caps. This needed to change instantly. I'll tell you, when my son walked into the kitchen, he would say, "Mom, our snack is running low. Can you see that?" He never said that to my husband. It's me. Yeah. I feel like, oh, gee, how come you don't talk this to your dad? Because you brought us the snacks. My sons, both of them like to always picture the snacks with mom, the supplies with mom. So I would say that's a typical picture in the kitchen. Mom's supposed to be the person to bring the food on the table, to take care of them at the dinner time. So it's definitely, it's true. Another thing I think as a working mom, we have also the social responsibility as well. Like we need to make sure we have work-life balance. I'm still struggling to find that perfect balanced point. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So it means slip of night. I noticed Anna, you have dark circle around your eye. I can imagine probably you'll have lots of sleepless night because your children are so small, because we all been there before. So that's how I feel like as a mom, not only we need to take care of what's under your roof, but also as a working mom as well, because we need to deliver like something at work. You are expected to make sure you reach that deadline. You are expected to give out the PhD paper, right, Jenny, to your professor. There's a deadline because this is critical to us. As a professional, we all want to meet the deadline. That's something I'm like, I just want to mention because this is really multitasking. It requires us to stay balanced. All right. I would say take care, mom, out there. I know what you're talking about. So that's it.
I read this book. I think it's called something working, CEOs Working Mom, something like that. And there's no balance. There's no work-life balance because it's not a scale. You can't just, so what I did like is that the alternative was to use the word sway. So there's like, you kind of sway in between, like from one thing to another. So it's ideally it's kind of liquid and you're able to do that, right? So it's not really prioritizing because your kids are always your priority, right? But sometimes like you get a phone call and you need to pick them up. And then, well, you're not the only one that can pick them up. Maybe someone else can pick them up. And so you just need to make an extra phone call. So it's more about kind of that sway. So I like that, but I definitely get it. I definitely have had my kids pass my husband in the kitchen, come to me as like, oh, can you cut up some strawberries? I'm like, your dad is in the kitchen. But yes, so baby steps. Marissa, you ready after your diaper change? Not your diaper change, your kids' change.
Okay, yeah, I'm here, I'm good.
We
All
were
right.
talking about society gender role
Yes.
and
so-
how that affected your experience.
Right. I think, well, I'm very blessed to have a husband who is on board 100%. And I think ours was a reversal sort of, because I had to go and on campus during the pandemic to teach classes. And he's been staying home for the past 18 months and hasn't been going to work physically. So he became sort of like the stay-at-home dad. But I think what really struck me during this time was with the expectations that I had for myself and what I saw others were expecting from me. I think I had to distinguish these two and, address what I knew I had to do over what other people were expecting me or what I was capable of doing, what other people were expecting from me. And so I remember with these roles, I had spoken to Doreen, I forgot her last name, but she works with us. And she had told me something about timeline, because I had asked her about, being a woman and having all these challenges and this work-life balance, or now you're saying this way. She just basically told me that it's just follow your own timeline. And that just resonated with me. It's not, don't follow other people's timeline, just follow your own timeline. And so with these gender roles and thinking about, hey, am I supposed to be like this tiger mom or this and that? I just realized, well, hey, I'll just follow my timeline. And so that gave me sort of a balance. And I would tell my husband, I can't do this, so you have to do this. And so it was almost, we were able to balance things out and distribute, the tasks and the chores at home.
Thank you, Marissa. So let's talk about the village, right? Many of us, perhaps in addition to, or perhaps without spouses, still have or ideally have a village, people who are there, people who can help, people who hopefully can be the stand-in, the sick day sort of person. So let's talk about the village. How were your relationships with your village, whatever that means to you, were impacted during this time? And I guess let's maybe start with Carrie. Who's your village? Do you have a village?
I guess my village is my family, right? So I would say under this, in this village, my husband and I, we are like, that's the only two person make sure we are be operating, the village is really running smoothly. It requires a lot of sacrifice from me and my husband as well during this village time. The reason we talk about this village because we have to share one common goal is to make sure we can just run this village all together, make sure we're on the same boat. So that's, I guess, that's the unique characteristics of a village. Make sure we are in the same boat. Make sure we have certain agreement. Even means it's sacrifice not only from my side, but truly is from my husband's side as well. That's the village. The village, if we can just run the village individually, like successfully, is also, I would say, bring the peaceful mind to I would say, to the entire family, like two of us plus the children as well. So it's really critical to have this the village concept to make sure if the family runs well, it's actually for each and every individual in that village will be the beneficiary as well. So that's how we picture the village during pandemic.
Thank you, Carrie. I'll just note that my village crumbled at the very beginning of the pandemic because no one could see each other. So yeah, so that was a big, it was like, wow, I didn't realize how much we relied on my mom to do all of these things and to be able to have like, an hour of quiet time. Marissa, you mentioned, you have, it sounds like you have really strong support from your husband. Who else makes up your village? How was that impacted during the pandemic?
Right. Well, I was going to rely on my mom. So she was supposed to fly to the United States, and then there was a lockdown. So she was supposed to be my village. But that didn't happen. So it was really just, me, my husband, and then I have a sister who sometimes helps us, but my husband was very scared during the pandemic. So no one was allowed at all in our house. So it was just us, me, my husband, my 8-year-old son then, and then my infant son. What helped a lot also was my 8-year-old son. All the chores that had to be done, he had to do it. So he had to do everything I could possibly ask for, he had to do. So, but yeah, so that helped a lot as well. But we also, because my family's not here, they're all in the Philippines. So we stayed more connected in a way through the Zoom meetings. So it sort of kept me sane, just talking to people I know. And that helped a lot. That helped me a lot as well.
Marissa. Jenny?
Yeah, and I was going to totally agree with you. My village crumbled. Like I realized my parents are like everything to me with anytime I needed something or an hour of quiet or whatever it was, I would call my mom, and all of a sudden, both of my parents were vulnerable. They both have underlying issues, and they were just, locked up, not going anywhere. We barely saw them for months. I think we ended up seeing them in the summer when things had sort of calmed down a bit. But I think that for me, it was really a learning curve to learn to ask for help in other ways. That was also, you know, piece that I didn't realize, that I think I always kind of took for granted, having a village, you know, having, you know, my parents that always helped. But then you kind of need to get things done. You just have to get through this, and you realize that it's not going to work if you don't have a hand. So I started looking, I mean, I was just reaching out to whoever I could, whoever, friends of friends, like, do you know anyone who's willing to maybe come to our house wearing the mask, you know, and just, you know, for some hours of the day, this was already in the summer, you know, and completely embarrassed and completely like, I was almost sadly ashamed to be asking, like, I had to ask everyone for help. I was even looking at care.com, like just anything for a hand, because my husband is supportive, but he's not the most supportive person in the world. He is he's great, but he struggles with my very young children, with my youngest, and I felt like I needed a hand. I really needed someone to help, and it took a while to kind of muster up the courage to just ask for help. And when I finally did, it was great. You know, we worked something out where, you know, this a girl who was on break from college at home, she was able to come help out for some hours in the day, and she became kind of our pod during that summer. She was the only person who came, but she became kind of the person I relied on. So it was a time of, you know, also opening up to other people, new relationships. And interestingly enough, you know, I know that this is always going to be viewed as the great retreat, kind of, you know, where everyone kind of siloed into their own little caves. But for me, it was also a time of connecting with others in different ways that, you know, I hadn't before, and communicating in different ways as well, learning to communicate.
So what's the silver lining? Where's the silver lining?
Well, on that note, on the silver lining, I think the silver lining for me was the time spent with my children, and learning so much about myself, as a mother, how little patience I have, and really just a new appreciation for the full-time job that is motherhood. You know, it really is. It's a roller coaster. And so learning new ways of communicating, opening up discussions, opening up topics that I feel weren't so much on the table before, or have always been there, but now are really highlighted with the pandemic, and having those conversations with you know, your significant other, or with whoever you have a relationship with. And for me, I think the silver lining is really learning new ways to relate to others, and especially our children. I could keep going, but I'll let others interject.
Marissa?
I think for me, the silver lining is when you see your kids, when I see my kids, and they're turning out okay. So let's say, so I work with my son, and sometimes I listen into his conversations with his class, and I hear him sometimes talking, and, you know, I'm like, wow, that came from you? Whose son are you? So it's like, yeah, those little things, those little successes. So when my son first learned how to walk, that was fun. When he started to eat and not mess up his station, that's a silver lining. It is all in these little things. When I didn't have to struggle to feed him, or when it was just so easy to breastfeed, oh my goodness, those are all silver linings. And I really, really appreciate those. I learned to appreciate those little things more during the pandemic.
Carrie?
I would say coronavirus is something like we never known before. This is something completely like nobody knows. Like I would say if we can get through this, we are really experienced. for this whole entire generation, for us, we are really experienced mom. We're really experienced parents. So no matter what's gonna happen, we are well prepared. It's like a training. It's like a warm-up for us, right? How to get a supply, make sure we have a toilet paper, everybody stay calm. We have a alcohol, 70% alcohol handy. How bad could it be? Now we heard this Delta variant. So I feel like I'm confident we're going to be a much better position if there's Delta like variants spread out or something. Because we are more experienced. I would say that's the silver lining. Although I hate the pandemic as everybody else, but if we can go through this, definitely this is it's an unforgettable experience for us. And also like for myself, I've learned a lot through this pandemic as well. Through the pandemic, there's certain I would say misinformation or misperception, say target a certain like Asian group of people. This certain like hateful speech during the pandemic. This is also the opportunity allow me to see so many people can stand up to like speak up. So many people can just unite together to fight against those hateful activities during pandemic. That's something I will never forget. This is also the opportunity I like to teach my kids, my student. Hate is never a solution. So let's spread our love if we can.
I think that's a wonderful message, Carrie. Thank you. I will share, and this is actually a perfect sort of plug-in. One of my silver linings has definitely been creating new bonds, new relationships, and two specific ones that I'd like to mention that really had to do about motherhood is with Natalia Vazquez-Bodkin and Amala Ogburn, who are not here today. Very sadly, they couldn't. This is really their program. This is Natalia's program, Natalia's brainchild. But for circumstances that we couldn't control, they couldn't be here. But I do want to most certainly give them a shout out, not only for all of the work that they've been doing, just in all of the programming in general, but personally on this particular topic, it's definitely something that I feel like I've benefited so much from just having those conversations with them. We were even able to kind of come out a few times with the kids running around. So it was definitely one of those things that I don't think would have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic. And so I'm truly, truly grateful because of that. So I want to open up for Q&A. So we have a number of mothers and others on the call today. If you want to ask any questions of our panelists, or if you just want to pose a question for all of us to talk about, we would definitely welcome it. So feel free to, there's not that many of us, so feel free to unmute yourself or just put the question in the chat, and I'm happy to take it up.
Hi.
Hi, Trisha.
Hey, everybody. Marissa, I had no idea that you had a baby around while you were being a superhero at work. So all of you, really, no idea. I have a big kid. She's bigger than me now. So so I didn't have to go through all of this because she was just pretty much an adult. But my question is, like, I hear Jenny, and I'm not calling you out, Jenny, because I had one of those husbands too, who was like, you know, actually he was a stay-at-home dad at one time, so he was good. But I read something somewhere where they were saying, like, women, we tend to make these, I shouldn't say women. Society tends to say stuff like, oh, he's a great dad, except he can't change diapers, he can't cut the kids strawberries or whatever. But moms, we don't say like, she's a great mom, but she just like forgets to pick up the kids sometimes from, you know, that's like, call the police, 911. So my question to you is, and I had a great support system when my daughter was small. I was a single mom for a lot of the time, but my mom and dad were like superheroes. So my question to you is, your husbands or the dads are great, but what can we do to make it so that dads feel comfortable being dads, and we're not just like saying, well, it's okay that you don't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I think, like I said about the silver lining, I think that opening up that discussion is the first step, because I feel like for me, you know, the pandemic opened up that discussion. Before this, like, it wasn't even a like question, like, no, I'm not going to ask you to change a diaper because I can do it and I can probably do it better. And, you know, there's also that, you know, there's also our own kind of gatekeeping, I think, that we do as moms, you know, where we think that we can just do it better, and we don't even allow for that space. And I know I certainly have done that for sure. You know, I just assumed that I am the person to do it. And I think that the pandemic allowed for that discussion to take place, where it's like, oh, wait a minute, no, you are free while I have a lunch meeting, and you also happen to be a very good cook, which he is. My husband, he just made me lunch. He's really wonderful at that. But somehow I was responsible for also preparing kids' lunches. I just assumed that because I know my kids better, because I know what they like to eat, you know, better, and I will just do it. So I think that this pandemic allowed for the opportunity to open up that discussion and say, hey, you know, you're really good at this too, and you've got two great hands that would be very useful in this situation. And I think a lot of the times with the stress of the pandemic, I don't think that always came out in the best ways. I think that a lot of times that might have just come out in an angry way, which was not productive. But once we're able to talk about these things, I think that is what begins the conversation, and what begins for those barriers to kind of be broken down, and for fathers to start feeling more comfortable in those roles in doing that. That's just my experience of my husband.
And
Great point, Jenny.
right. And because of this, I also, you know, I'm more mindful of certain things. I have two sons. So right now I'm starting my 9-year-old really early. So he's washing dishes and doing all these things, because I don't like this whole gender thing that he can't wash dishes and do certain things because he's male. So I think that's a thing too. We have to do as mothers or parents to our children. And I think for my husband, well, aside from the fact that I'm blessed to have him, it's that our circle of friends, all the husbands are the same. So it was like kind of, hey, how come he's doing it and you're not? So it was always like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, it wasn't pandemic related, but when my daughter was born, I went back to work and my husband was at home with my daughter. And I got a lot of commentary like, how could you leave her? And aren't you worried about her? I'm like, she's with her dad. It's not, I didn't leave her on the street corner somewhere, you know? So, yeah. But that's interesting to me, because we've seen so much change. So many women have left the workforce, and there's two things, like Jenny was saying. We had school, one of our defaults in this country for childcare is school, public school, and then childcare centers, and both were closed. And so, and then like you were all saying, like if you can't have, or like Anna was saying about your mom, right? Like about being able to kind of punt, and that was I punted to my mom and dad all the time. I really did. Like, I can't get there, please go get her from whatever it was. So no, I think that's great.
I would just share. So one of the things that I've definitely learned to do more of is just let go. And even if I think I'm the better one at doing it, I don't care. Let him do it. So one of the things, so I had in the spring, I was more or less the one responsible for my daughter's remote situation school. And it was just a nightmare. And we were crying every day. There was begging and crying, and she's in like first grade at the time. So like, you know, we're talking about a 3-minute worth of homework that took like an hour of negotiation and crying to do. And then at some point, somehow I just let my husband do it, to the point where I'm like, she didn't do her homework, okay. Is she, you know, and then at the end of the school year this year, you know, he was telling me like, you know, we got this report card and, you know, this and that. I'm like, is she going to 3rd grade? She's like, yes, that's all I care about. That's it. We'll figure out tutoring and other things when the time is right. But like right now, I don't care. So that was my way of passing on, sort of like, let him do it. And however he's doing it, I'm not saying he's better or I'm better. It's just let him do it. It's okay.
Great point, everyone. I just wanted to add, I just wanted to add a little bit of my experience is to go a little easier on the iPad policy, you know, iPhone, iPad policy. For me, sometimes I just loosen up our policy, say, okay, you guys are free, okay? So by doing that, both my husband and I can have a little bit of time to relax, so they can play the games. Go ahead, just do it. So during the pandemic, I would say definitely our policy on those electronic gadgets, it's kind of a loosen up in exchange for a little bit of rest for us. So that's my solution, sort of solution.
Are you kidding me? You know, Octonauts and Paw Patrol, the best babysitters ever. They're free. Listen.
Just let it go, yeah.
Do we have any single parents or single moms here who want to talk a little bit about their experience? Yes, I know, Nikki. I was kind of thinking of you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I hear everyone speaking about different things as far as a village and support. And, you know, as I'm listening to it, I have to say that you guys are really, well, you ladies are really lucky to have husbands and families that are willing to step in as needed. I remember just even before the pandemic, being a single mother and just trying to work during the week and on the weekends and struggling so bad just to have a babysitter. For one, I had a child with special needs that was always like misbehaved. So it was like a struggle. Now that they're teenagers, it is a little easier. But in the midst of the pandemic, you know, my experience with my daughter was still the same. We cuddle, we talk. You know, she became a little weary because she, as a 15-year-old, was worried about her social life. And I'm like, your social life? But then it, you know, it made sense. Being in a house all day, every day can definitely do something to you overall, your mental, your emotional, and just like physically not being able to be out. But I appreciated the time because it did allow me to focus. I was a COVID graduate. It gave me a lot of time for reflection and just appreciating the little things in life. But as far as my son didn't take the pandemic as serious, and he was always outside. So it was always like a nerve wreck for me that he was going to get sick. He was going to get sick because he was not following the rules, being a hard-headed teenager and just, you know, just still running around with no mask and everything. But overall, motherhood for me during the pandemic, it was regular, but it just allowed me to appreciate some more time with them instead of always being at work or always being at school. We were pretty much under the same roof together.
Thank you for sharing, Nakia.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? I am very much aware how grateful I am to my husband, to my parents, to even in-laws sometimes. Because I know that that's a lot more than others go through or others have. So I'm very, very much aware that this is something that I have the privilege of having around me. Like Marissa said, her mom is not even in the country and mine is in the country. So, and that she's 10 minutes away. So I'm super, super grateful. Yeah, there's definitely a lot. So unless anyone has any other questions, I do want to wrap it up. I do want to first say a big thank you to our panelists and sharing their experience, to Carrie, Marissa, Jenny. I most definitely want to send a big, wherever they are, having a great time, Natalia and Amala, for their making this happen, for creating this. And make sure to tell them there was a great program, because Natalia was very nervous. And I will end with hopefully on a more positive note about those moments where it's really the little moments that really count no matter what we go through. And so this is a poem, it's not mine. It's called "Do Not Ask Your Children to Strive" by William Martin. Do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Such striving may seem admirable, but it is the way of foolishness. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life. Show them the joy of tasting tomatoes, apples, and pears. Show them how to cry when pets and people die. Show them the infinite pleasure in the touch of a hand, and make the ordinary come alive for them. The extraordinary will take care of itself. So I'll end on that note. I hope you have an extraordinary day with all the ordinary moments. And feel free to reach out and let us know if you have any questions. There's a lot more PAC Day and Summer Inclusion Tour coming up in the next few weeks. So tune in every Thursday at 3. Wait, 2, I'm sorry, Thursday at 2. So that's it. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.